Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kate Jacobson. I'm a librarian with the Ramsey County Libraries, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you this afternoon to Tuesday with the Scholar, where today we'll be hearing from Li Pao Zhang about the 50th anniversary of the Hmong in Minnesota. But before we get to that, a few things I'd like to say. This program is brought to you through the co-sponsorship of the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute of the University of Minnesota and the financial support of the Ramsey County Libraries. And we're deeply grateful to both organizations for making these programs possible. And now I'm going to say a few things about our speaker. I had to trim down this one because he has such a great bio. Li Pao Zhang is currently the founding director of the Center of Hmong Studies at Concordia University, St. Paul. And he's a professor of American government, political science, and Hmong studies. Throughout his distinguished career, Zhang served as the Director of Housing Policy and Development for the City of Minneapolis, President and CEO of the Urban Coalition, Executive Director of the State Council on Asian Pacific Minnesotans, Hmong American Partnership, and the Hmong Youth Association of Minnesota. In 2000, President William Jefferson Clinton appointed Li Pao Zhang to serve on the President's Advisory Commission on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders to advise the President and federal agencies on issues relating to the 10+ million Asian Americans in the United States, making him the first Hmong presidential appointee in the nation. Li Pao has won numerous awards for his service to the community. He is a co-founder of the Hmong Resource Fair, the Asian Festival, now known as the Dragon Boat Festival in St. Paul, Hmong Academy, now known as Hmong College Prep Academy, Hmong Community School of Excellence, and the Asian Development Corporation, now Asian Economic Development Association. Currently, he serves as chairs of the board of the CPAC Takra of USA and the Hmong United Martial Arts Society. He's also on the board of Change Incorporated and an advisor to the Hmong Museum. He is widely sought after as a speaker and diversity trainer by many educational institutions and community organizations on Hmong history, culture, and society, as well as leadership and nonprofit board governance. So, no further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Lee.
Wow, thank you, Kay, for that wonderful long introduction. You should have trimmed more. But I appreciate the wonderful reception here. Again, my name is Li Pao Xiong. It's wonderful to have to be here with all of you, and thank you so much for Ramsey County Library for inviting me to be part of the program. Now I'm going to share with you my screen here. Let's see if that will work. Technology is always fun. Okay, now can you see? Okay. All right. So, Kay already went over my background. So, basically, I am from the public policy arena and was thrust into this position when the president of Concordia University invited me to come and start the Center for Hmong Studies in 2004. So, been there for about 20 plus years. So it's been a fun ride and learned a lot. Anyways, as we look at the impact of the Hmong community on, not only here in Minnesota, but throughout the nation, there are several people that rise to the top that basically elevated the Hmong names and into international prominence. I would say one, basically, our very own Sunisa Lee. And as you know, she won the Olympic medal in Japan several years ago. And went back and won some more medals. And so Sunisa is actually from St. Paul, Minnesota, basically on the east side of St. Paul. Then you also have Gokali Young, who is a prominent author and published award-winning three biography and autobiography. And then now she's into children's literature. So she'll be coming out with more books I think it was she just announced another book that's coming out next year. And of course, you have Xia Yevang, and he's a regular appearance. He's got his own show on Channel 2, but has a restaurant in Minneapolis. And then Chef Diane Moore also was awarded the Restaurant of the Year, Entrepreneur of the Year with Food and Wine magazine. So we're surrounded by all of these wonderful people who elevated the Hmong name, not only in Minnesota, but throughout the world, basically. And then Minnesota is also known for its progressiveness in terms of politics, right? Here in Minnesota, 10 of the legislators of the Capitol are actually of Hmong descent. In fact, we have the largest, as far as per capita, the largest number of Asian elected official at any state legislature, with the exception of Hawaii. So we're proud that we have representation not only at the state level, but at the county level and at the city level. And most of these legislators are either from the metro, on the East Metro or the West Metro. Like, for example, Representative XP Lee, who was just elected to or the late Melissa Hortman's seat after she was murdered and assassinated. You also have Senator Susan Parr from the West Metro. You have Representative Fu Lee from the West Metro, and then you also have Representative Samantha Vang from the West Metro. The rest of them are actually from the East Metro. So we're proud that to have these representation not only at the Capitol, but at local seats of government as well. And who would have thought that not only just we're making impact here in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, but also impact throughout the United States. So if you venture to Pennsylvania and you visit the Amish community and you felt the need to buy an Amish quilt to take it home, most of those Amish quilts are actually made by Hmong people in the New England area, like in DC, North Carolina, South Carolina. They made it for the Amish and for the tourist industry there. So you're probably buying Hmong quilts. And then if you eat strawberries and it's from California, most likely it's from a Hmong strawberry farmer. Hmong dominates 70% of the strawberry market in California. Same thing in Washington State. If you buy flowers, particularly in the winter month, if you buy flowers from Washington State, it's most likely from a Hmong farm. The Hmong also dominate the flower market in Washington State. One year I was in Pipe Market and I saw this elderly lady selling flowers. I was like, "You look very Hmong to me. Are you Hmong?" She said, "Yeah, I am. All of these vendors are Hmong." And so I was surprised, like, okay. But the state of Washington, basically several years ago, in their resettlement plan to integrate Hmong into the local economy, actually worked on the flower farm industry, incorporating Hmong into the flower market. And then if you're eating papaya chicken or I would say Papaya chicken or Kentucky Fried Chickens, most of that's probably from Hmong poultry farm in Missouri and Arkansas. So after 1990, we have a sizable number of Hmong people actually moving to Missouri and Arkansas and bought out a lot of the farms that were being vacated by some of the farmers there and turned them into chickens and farms. And then if you also, venture into North and South Carolina and you're eating a chicken or you're eating eggs for your breakfast, most likely it's from a Hmong and a Karen farm as well. And so a lot of the Hmong have also moved to North and South Carolina to take advantage of the poultry industry. And now, for many of us who eat bamboos, we have a sizable number of Hmong farmers over there growing bamboos and shipping canned bamboo shoots to the Midwest to sell here. As well, not only that, but also rice. Hmong are now growing rice in Georgia and in North Carolina, South Carolina, and shipping and packaging them and shipping them to the Midwest here as well. Now we have also Hmong people moving into Florida, and many of them are actually, growing vegetables as well as tropical fruits and shipping them to the Midwest here for the market. So if you go to Hmong Marketplace or on which is on Marion and Como Avenue in St. Paul, or Hmong Village on the east side of St. Paul, on Pennsylvania Avenue there, uh, you will see a lot of these produce being sold at those vegetable vendors. So that's where we go and get fresh, fresh vegetables like mustard greens and so on and so forth, as well as logans and lychees and mangoes. And here in Minnesota, if you go to the flower market in Minneapolis and St. Paul, most of those are, I would say, a sizable number of growers are actually known. And then the Hoffa Farm on Highway 52, as you approach Cannon Fall, the Hmong American Farmers Association, Hoffa Farms, they actually produce a lot of organic vegetables and ship them to many of the local restaurants and local grocery stores in the Twin Cities. And then Wisconsin ginseng, I would say United States ginseng is probably one of the most prized, with the exception of Korean red ginseng, the United States ginseng. It's one of the prized ginseng in the world. Most of those are grown in Wausau, Wisconsin area. So many Hmong farmers also grow those ginseng. So when I need some ginsengs, I just call some of my friends and they sell them to me and at a very affordable price. Fresh ginseng. We have some Chinese guests. I had some Chinese guests from China came here. What they were looking for was just United States ginseng. And so we're able to get them a good deal. And then as you travel if you were going to travel to the East Coast and you happen to stop by Michigan, many of the Asian restaurants there are actually owned by Hmong. And so Thai restaurants, from Thai to Chinese to Japanese. In fact, many of the sushi makers that you find at Craves and other places here in the Twin Cities, Japanese restaurants, some of those are actually Hmong sushi chefs. So when I walk into a Crave, I always go into the sushi counter to see if there's a Hmong person working behind there, and I get a good deal, fresh fish, and good deal on those sushi. So we are actually everywhere in your food, in the community. Yet, after 50 years, we still have some people that still do not know who the Hmong people are, how they ended up here, and why are we here. Economically, I think the Hmong community have also made a big gain in contributing to the local economy. Like here in Minnesota, for example, the buying power of the Hmong community is now at $2.3 billion. So big increase from 2000 of 311 million to $2.3 million. These are statistics put together by Dr. Bruce Corey, an economic professor here at Concordia University. Tax contributions to Minnesota, the Hmong obviously also paid a large amount of money to the Minnesota, the state of Minnesota. So in 2000, $34 million was paid to the state of Minnesota in terms of tax. In 2021, it's $286 million. We also have seen a decline in poverty as well. In 1990, the poverty rate within the Hmong community was at 60%. In 2000, it was 31%. 2021, it's only 14%. So I think one of the things that when I was home doing my doctorate on a leave, I was watching Dr. Phil, and it was an economist. He was a psychologist that came on. I was watching Oprah Winfrey. It wasn't Dr. Phil. It was Oprah Winfrey. And one of the psychologists came on board and said, we walk through three stages in our life. The first stage is stage of um, dependency. And then the second stage is stage of preparatory, and the third stage is stage of contributions. So I would say now, you have a sizable number of people in the contribution stage. In the early days when the Hmong were coming, many of them were in the stage of dependency and also preparatory. So many of the people who prepare themselves to become economically self-sufficient are now in the third stage and are contributing to the economy and contributing to the well-being of the Hmong community. To the point where, that other companies across the world, particularly in, China, in uh, Laos, and in Thailand, they're now catering some of the products to the Hmong community. For example, the pho staple. Pho is a Vietnamese staple, and but now we have Hmong pho, uh, and rice brand. They put a smack a picture of Hmong families on there, and they call it Hmong family brand, so that it would lure the Hmong community to buying these products from Thailand. Same thing, Hmong people don't usually eat soy sauce, and yet now there's a Hmong soy sauce brand. So other communities are, seeing this and taking advantage of the economic buying power of the Hmong community throughout the United States. Yeah. So as we look at, the demographic of the Hmong community, there are about 365,000 Hmong in the United States. So 365,000 Hmong in the United States, about 12 million Hmong in China. That's where the Hmong came from, originated from. And then about 600,000 in Thailand, 1.2 million in Vietnam, 200,000 in Thailand, and about 2,000 or so in Myanmar or Burma. So we are scattered throughout the world. Most of the Hmong who are here in the United States came here because of our relationship and our partnership with the United States during the Secret War of Laos, or during the Vietnam War. So here in Minnesota, we have 103,000 Hmong. We have the largest Hmong population in the United States here in Minnesota, the largest urbanized Hmong population in the United States here as well. So all the Hmong, I would say 90% of the Hmong are in the 7-county metro area. And that's why you see the political representation. Like, for example, on the east side of St. Paul, the state representative from Woodbury, he's Hmong, representing Ethan Cha. The state senator from Maplewood is Hmong, Senator Tu Xiong. You have State Representative Liz Lee, State Representative Jay Xiong, Senator Fong He, all from the east side of St. Paul. And then you also have uh, Commissioner, Ramsey County Commissioner Mike Chong, also from the east side, and then Council Member Nelson Yang from the east side. So it's because of the concentration among people in those local area. And again, as I mentioned, people are also moving in the West Metro area, and so you have a sizable number of Hmong in Woodbury. I mean, not in that Broken Park, Broken Center in Coon Rapids as well. So 103,000 Hmong in Minnesota. In California, 101,000. Wisconsin, about 60,000. So if you were to combine Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa, this is where a bulk of the Hmong community are. And California used to be the number one, but we surpassed them. And in Wisconsin, they're scattered everywhere. That's why you don't see the political power and political strength and economic strength. California, the same thing. They're scattered everywhere, not just in one area. So, there's advantages to living together, I would say. Now, many of the people wonder, where did the Hmong come from? When we mention Hmong, people say, well, is that a country? Where is that? And during the war, of course, there was no mention about the Hmong people. If you go to China, there's no mention about Hmong people, but there's mention about Miao people. The Miao and the, are basically the Hmong people. So in China, the Hmong are known as Miao. But in the Hmong in Southeast Asia, view that term as very derogatory. Some extent. But when you look at Chinese historical text, Chinese history, they said that the Hmong have lived in China for 5 to 8,000 years. In fact, the Hmong were living in China before the Chinese came. So when the Chinese came into China, what we now call China, the Hmong was already living there. Excuse me. They're credited with as one of the first group to cultivate wet rice. In fact, the term Miao in Chinese means the people that cultivated wet rice. So on top, it's the rice sprout. On the bottom is rice paddy. And so that's the Chinese character for Miao. And so the Hmong were the first to cultivate rice paddy. They were also skilled at metal foraging, creating tools and weapons. During that time, people were only using copper, but the Hmong was already using metal and to forge that into weapons. About 5,000 years ago, there was a major conflict with the Chinese, with Huangdi, the emperor of China. Huangdi is the Chinese emperor. Yangdi is the Manchurian emperor. They fought over land, and the Hmong eventually was defeated, and the Hmong started migrating to southern part of China. And then in the 1800s or so, there were a lot of persecutions against the Hmong people, discrimination against the Hmong people. So the Hmong rose up and rebelled against the Chinese. And so some left China and ventured into Southeast Asia. So, like I said, right now we still have 12 million Hmong people living in the southern provinces of China. And so primarily in Guizhou, Hunan, Yunnan, Sichuan, Chongqing, and Guangxi. Like for example, in Guizhou, China. So just imagine the state of Minnesota, we have about, I think we have probably six million Hmong people now. So just imagine 2/3 of the people uh, uh, living in Guizhou. And 2/3 of Hmong people hit Minnesota being of Hmong descent. So in the 1800s, again, there was a series of rebellion against the Chinese, and they peeled off and migrated to northern part of Vietnam, northern part of Thailand, northern part of Burma, and also Laos. So then when the Hmong came down from China to Southeast Asia, at that time, French colonized Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. And so the Hmong came and stayed up the mountains, didn't bother the French until the French realized that the Hmong were living up there. They came and imposed high taxes on the Hmong. So the Hmong fought against the French. And then when the Japanese came, the Hmong sided with the French to fight against the Japanese during World War II. And when after World War II ended, Ho Chi Minh came into power basically, and because he was asking for independence from France, and so he fought against the French, and some of the Hmong actually sided with the French to fight against the communists. Uh, Ho Chi Minh's troop, the Viet Minh. So when the French was defeated at Dien Bien Phu in 1954, the American came into Southeast Asia, because at that time, if you think about, you have the Russian Revolution, and then you have the Russian Communist Revolution, the Stalin Revolution, and then you have the Chinese, the Mao Zedong Revolution, kicking out the nationalists, Chiang Kai-shek, and so that whole region was started to become, red, become communist. And so United States of America fear that that whole region would that whole continent would turn into communism. So the United States then came into Southeast Asia. One thing to keep in mind is that the Geneva Conference in 1954, where the French surrendered and gave power to the communists, the country of Vietnam was divided into two at the 17th parallel. And part of that agreement was that there would be an election in 2 years, and also that Laos was supposed to be neutral, and that no one was supposed to be in Laos or touch Laos. But Although that agreement was signed, the United States never signed the agreement because the United States knew that if there was an election in Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh would win the election. And so, but anyways, Ho Chi Minh was using, after the 17th parallel border was defined, Ho Chi Minh was using Laos to ship military supplies and troops down to South Vietnam to fight against against the Viet Cong. The Viet Cong are resistant fighters of Ho Chi Minh, and they were fighting against the South Vietnamese government, who are basically pro West. Okay, so Ho Chi Minh was using Laos and coming into Laos. So under President Kennedy's administration, he actually sent special forces into Laos and to also work with the Hmong people in Laos to fight against Ho Chi Minh, to fight against the communists. But then there was also an agreement. There was a military coup in 1960, with basically by a American trained parachutist. He took over the country of Laos because there was so much political turmoil within the country of Laos. And part of his decree was that in 72 hours, America need to leave the country of Laos. He talked about America leaving, but he never talked about uh, the Russians, the Chinese, or the Vietnamese who were in Laos fighting and using Laos as staging area to attack South Vietnam. So the United States didn't see that as a viable option. So the United States sent in the CIA and to basically to work with the Hmong population to contain communism on behalf of the United States. And so United States was not supposed to be in Laos, but they sent CIA advisors in to train the Hmong people to fight on behalf of the Americans. So if you look at this picture from Associated Press, the American advisors are not dressed in military fatigue. Because if they were to dress in military fatigue, that means that America was introducing military troops into the country of Laos. That would violate the Vientiane Agreement in 1961 and the Vientiane and the Geneva Conference in 1954. So in terms, they came in, they used Thai to train the Hmong, and they used American CIA advisor to train the Hmong. So we were fighting on behalf of the United States to help the United States contain communism in the country of Laos. But more importantly, people have said the Hmong are mercenaries, and we said we're not mercenaries because we fought to defend our homeland. That's where we live, and but we were recruited, trained, and financed by the CIA to engage the North Vietnamese army using guerrilla tactics to fight against the North Vietnamese army, who was using Laos to fight again to bring troops into South Vietnam to help the Viet Cong fight against the American in South Vietnam. And so the Hmong were using that capacity, were involved in that capacity. So we were fighting, and according to William Colby, who was the CIA director, he said if it weren't for the Hmong fighting against the 50,000 or 70,000 North Vietnamese regular in Laos, those 70,000 Vietnamese regular would have been made successfully, would have made to South Vietnam and to fight against the American troops there, thus killing more than 50,000 Americans. So if it weren't for the Hmong, there'll be 50,000 additional names, casualty names, the Great Wall, at that wall in Washington, D.C. So that's from William Colby, the CIA director's perspective. But the Hmong were also tasked with rescuing downed American pilots. If they're shot, American pilots who were flying into North Vietnam and South Vietnam, if they were somehow shot, they need to basically fly into Laos and to crash in Laos so the Hmong could rescue them. If they had bombs left over, they were encouraged to come and bomb enemy position within northern part of Laos. So the Hmong were tasked with basically rescuing American pilots. They were tasked with gathering intelligence for U.S. operations and don't and to guard strategic radar sites. There's a famous site called Lima 82 Pupati, which the Hmong were tasked with. It was United States Air Force radar installation site, which got overran by the communists in 1968. My father was also stationed up in that Pupati uh, radar installation sites. So well, I have a grandfather who lost 30 of his men trying to rescue an American pilots who was shot down. He successfully rescued the American pilots, but he lost 30 men. And so, and there were a lot of bombing. They said that there's more bomb drop in Laos than there were bomb dropped during World War One and World War Two. And people are still dying this day in the country of Laos from these unexploded ordinances, right? And they Americans were encouraged to drop the bomb in Laos, and you are never supposed to fly back to Thailand. The American whole operation was based out of Thailand because they couldn't have military base in Laos. That would violate the agreement, the Vientiane Agreement, the Geneva Conference Agreement. And so they operate everything out of Thailand. They would all these bombing runs would fly. They would fly out of Thailand, but if there's some bombs left over, they would drop in Laos. You never fly back with bombs because there may be an enemy that will be shooting at the plane and the plane could crash into the American base. So they would not allow planes to go back home with bombs. Anyway, so the Hmong again fought to defend the land, fought to engage the North Vietnamese army to rescue American pilots, to gather intelligence for the U.S. operation, to guard strategic radar sites. I have an uncle that was basically would fly. The special forces would fly him deep into him and his battalion into northern part of Vietnam, and just to gather intelligence, and then bring that back with pictures and so on and so forth, and give it to the CIA so they could direct the B-52 bombs and the jets bombing strategic sites in North Vietnam. So, aftermath of the war, the Hmong suffered heavy casualty. So the Hmong fought against, again, more than 70,000 North Vietnamese forces in Laos. They helped save over 50,000 American lives in South Vietnam by doing so. And approximately 30,000 Hmong soldiers were killed during the war from 1961 to 75. And another 50,000 Hmong perished after the war from 75 to 80. And so most recent, when we look at the evacuation of Afghanistan, people say, well, the Afghanistan basically said, no, we're not going to do anything to these people. But that's what the Lao communists said to us too. Don't worry, we're not going to do anything to you. After the American pulled out in 1975, we're not going to do anything to you, and stay, and we will incorporate you into our new society, new government. But they killed over 50,000 people because of that. So a lot of people, died, drowned in the river trying to escape. They were ambushed on their way out, or their village were being burned. And many of them were sent to re-education camp. So, for example, the king of Laos, he died in re-education camp. After they took over, they forced him to resign, and they shipped him to the re-education camp, and he died there. And this young lady that you see here, her family crossed the Mekong River into Thailand from Laos. They were forced back by the Thai military into Laos again, and they got caught by the Peta Lao and North Vietnamese troops in Laos, given 10 minutes to say their goodbye, and they opened fire on the family. Only this little girl survived, and so she made it into Thailand after her family died. So many people escaped to Thailand to sought refuge there, and after 1975. And from there, then the United Nations came in, the United States came in, and started to screen people for resettlement. So there were criteria that were set up by the United States Immigration Office, basically the Attorney General's office. And so one of the criteria is that you must have worked directly with the United States agencies and the United States government, such as the CIA or the USAID, US Aid for International Development. But at that time, there were only a handful of people that worked directly with the CIA or USAIDs. So you can count on using your fingers. You must have family members already residing in the United States. At that time, we had basically zero. Or you must have served in the military or faced persecution if forced to return to Laos. So most of the people who came to America came under category number 3, and then eventually number 2. And so these are the 2 categories that most of the Hmong who came earlier came under this classification. And then the state agency basically contracted with resettlement agency, we call it voluntary organization, VOLAG, to resettle refugees. And so these resettlement agencies include International Institute, Church World Services, Lutheran Social Service, Catholic Charities, Mennonite and Quaker Services. And so they were responsible for finding sponsors to sponsor families. And my family was sponsored by a Mennonite church in Morgantown or Bean Blossom, Indiana, which is a community that's right outside of Bloomington. So here's a picture of you see on here a picture, newspaper article of my family. And the church was very kind in that they went to the University of Indiana, Bloomington, and recruited Japanese Japanese students to come and prepare a meal for us for our arrival from the airport. So we were fortunate that they took the special efforts to do that to make us feel comfortable. So they placed these voluntary agencies. They're associated with churches, so they placed them in communities where they had churches. One of the criteria was that these refugees, because the war was very unpopular, they didn't want to concentrate these Southeast Asian refugees in one area. That would cause, I would say, eyebrows raised, or that it would cause an undue burden on the local community. So that's why the Hmong and other Southeast Asian were scattered throughout the United States. But little did they know that we're a community-oriented society. We're going to come back again together. So that's why you see Minnesota, a sizable number of families here. I brought 40 families from California and Georgia to Minnesota in the late 1990s. But I think what's really very important is the role that Walter Mondale played during the Carter administration when they call it the boat people, right? The boat people crisis. After the fall of Laos and the fall of Vietnam in 1975, many people took to the seas. And so Vice President Walter Mondale from Minnesota was actually very instrumental in calling on the international community to sponsor, to help these Southeast Asian refugees. And then here in Minnesota, in the United States, you also have, President Jimmy Carter was also very active in looking out for the interests of the Southeast Asian refugees coming out of Southeast Asia. And when I talk about Southeast Asia, I'm talking about Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam. So he established the Office of Refugee Resettlement and expanded the definition of refugee to align with United Nations Refugee Charter. Prior to the United Nations Refugee Charter, here in the United States, everything was still about World War II. And so here it added, the United Nations Charter added more escaping political persecutions from people from throughout the world, and actually gave rights for refugees. So the Office of Refugee Resettlement was established under Jimmy Carter's administration. Governor Al Kui in 1979 then flew to Ban Vinai refugee camp, which is the largest refugee camps in Thailand, and predominantly Hmong. And he flew to the refugee camp, came back, and equate the living conditions of the refugee camps as to the Holocaust, and some of these concentration camps. So you can still find the interview on Minnesota Public Radio of Governor El Kui on his return trip from Thailand on YouTube, on social media. Anyways, he came back and he lobbied the churches, and he also lobbied the State Department to send people to Minnesota. The state of Iowa, the governor actually put a advertisement in the New York Times for the refugees to move to Iowa to work in some of the meat packing plants in Iowa and some of the farms. But Governor Alkey was very active in in lobbying the State Department to bring the refugees to Minnesota. And he also established the Office of Resettlement at the state. So there's a national one, Office of Resettlement, and then there's a state one that was established by Governor El Kui. And he hired Jane Kretzman as the first director, and then my uncle as the first staff member. My uncle, Mr. Ling Vong, who came here as a refugee, the first Hmong refugee to arrive here. And then George Latimer also did the same thing. George Latimer established the Office of Refugee Services and employed Amy Crawford as his first executive director for that office. So, as I mentioned earlier, the first Hmong to arrive in Minnesota arrived here actually in November 1975. So that's He Dang, who just recently passed away 2 years ago. He arrived in Elk River, and he was a USAID employee. So when his supervisor who worked worked for the USAID heard that He Dang was living in the refugee camps, he petitioned He Dang, and He Dang applied for political asylum. That's how he ended up in Minnesota. But He Dang was the first Hmong in Minnesota, but not the first Hmong refugee. And then Ling Wang, who worked closely with Jerry Daniel, the CIA operative that was assigned to work with Jerome Powell in the Hmong. He was sponsored by Dayton Avenue Presbyterian Church and a McAllister Plymouth United Church. Kathy Valinga's church basically sponsored him. And when Kathy Valinga's church decided to sponsor a refugee, they thought they were sponsoring a Vietnamese refugee. So when the Hmong first came, they said, we're Hmong. And Kathy Valinga said, who are the Hmong people? I thought we were all sponsoring Vietnamese. So, but anyways, they were placed at Liberty Plaza in St. Paul. So Liberty Plaza, it's on 94 and Western Avenue. So prior to the Hmong coming and living there, the first time settling there, it was predominantly African American. Then the African American moved out, and then the Hmong came in. Then the Hmong moved out. Ethiopians came in, and then Ethiopian moved out. Now it's Somali, so predominantly Somali. But Mr. Ling Wang is still, he's still active in the community. In fact, he owns several buildings in town, but the most notable one would be Sunrise Market on University Avenue, University in Lexington. So if you go into that market place there, there's a Hmong restaurant in there. There's a Hmong grocery stores, Hmong law firms, Hmong hairdressing place, and insurance, chiropractors. So it's a little mini mall at Sunrise Market. Then I credit Mr. Savang and Mr. Kim Long for developing University Avenue. I remember when we came here in 1979, we had no Asian grocery store in Minnesota, and we were buying produce from a Thai lady who was selling Thai food like rice and bamboo shoots and all that out of the garage of her home in Little Canada. And so it was our family my family, along with close family members that were here earlier, We started a co-op, and basically it's called Hmong Lao Oriental Food, and bought a truck and drove all the way to Chicago to buy retail and brought it back here for the store to sell it retail to, to the general public. Now, if you look at University Avenue, it's all different, right? So Mr. Savang was the first executive director of Lao Family Community of Minnesota. The Lao Family building is still on University Avenue, although there's no offices anymore. The organization basically defunct. But he was responsible for introducing farmers market, the Hmong to the farmers market. When they came here, the they Hmong wanted to sell in the farmers market, and the farmers market say you can't because you have to be trained in herbicide and pesticide. So Mr. Savang went to Diane Aaron, who was a commissioner, Ramsey County commissioner at that time, and they worked together to get the University of Minnesota Extension Services to train Hmong people to go into farming. And so they had a training program to teach Hmong how to use pesticides, herbicide. And there was even a program to help Hmong to go into animal husbandry as well. And that was in Winona. It's funded by the state and funded by Office of Refugee Resettlement in Washington, D.C. And so when the Hmong went through all the program, after they completed the program, then they were allowed to sell at the farmers market. And some of you may or may not know, you can pass on the ownership to your children. And so people like, Baku Han, who worked with Senator Wellstone's office before, ran as a city council members and so on and so forth, and was in charge of Hafa Farm. Her parents came through the farmers market program. Dr. Lucky Yang, who is the chief surgeon at St. John's Hospital in Maplewood, his whole family also farmed through that program. And so they became farmers, sold through the market, and basically raised successful children. Senator Mimoa is the same thing. So many of the Hmong got involved in the farmers market and have managed to produce a lot of professionals for the community. But he was the person that was responsible for introducing Hmong to the farmers market. And so that's why you see that population. Several of my family members are still active in growing vegetables and selling vegetables at the farmers market. He was also responsible for working with Governor El Kui to plan for his trip to Thailand to bring Hmong to Minnesota. He was also a entrepreneur that bought a lot of buildings in North Minneapolis and along University Avenue that were boarded up. As you know, the University Avenue area, that was the Rondo neighborhood, right? So in the 60s or so, when the freeway came through, it dispersed the African American community, basically destroyed the African American community in that area. And so many of them moved out the suburbs, and so a lot of storefronts were empty. And so the Hmong came in, took advantage of that, and transformed that into a vibrant community, a vibrant street. So a lot of the business along University Avenue were developed by Mr. Savang, Mr. Kim Long. Mr. Kim Long had the Kim Long restaurant right on, I think it's Sherman on close to Snelling, Western Avenue, and also University Avenue. He owned the first Vietnamese restaurant there. He developed the international marketplace. He wanted to develop the corner of Dale and University Avenue, but was not very successful. And I remember him telling me one day, when we have more Southeast Asian at the city council, then we will be able to transform the whole neighborhood. He wanted to erect a like one of those Chinatown arch. He wanted to do that, but it didn't happen. But University and Dale at that time was a very unpopular place. Many of you, if you know, it was the False Theater that was right there. And so he was bidding on transforming that into making that into something outside besides the negative aspect of that component, but unsuccessful in doing so. But he ended up developing, international marketplace, which is right on between University Avenue and also Western Avenue. And so now in there you have cafes, you have the used to be the former, you also have a Sichuan hot pot place. So if you're looking for hot pot, I encourage you to go to that little Sichuan restaurant right in there. So that's International Marketplace. So even though, within the last 50 years, we made enormous gain within the community, there's still a lot of challenges faced with the Hmong community. And like, for example, now many of the elders are afraid that their children are losing the culture, losing their language, losing their history. And many of them were also fighting to have, again, to have ethnic studies in the schools, to start teaching history, culture, and language in the regular schools. And so now we're starting to see an emergence of Hmong charter schools in the community because uh, they felt that the regular public schools was too slow in getting things done, right? And in introducing history and culture and language into the curriculum. So now we have charter schools, like, for example, Community School of Excellence in the North End area, to Monash College Prep Academy in the Snelling University Midway area. You have Hope Academy on the east side of St. Paul, Lower East Side of St. Paul. And then you have Prairie Seed in Brooklyn Park. You also have Noble Academy in Brooklyn Park. And so we have charter schools popping up everywhere to try to meet the needs and address the concerns of parents and community members about the preservation of our history, our culture, and our language. We have museum right now. We're having a conversation about pulling a group of people together to look at the possibility of formally installing museum in creating museum. We have a Hmong museum now. We have Hmong Culture Center Museum. We have the Center for Hmong Studies, but we're looking at how do we combine all of our efforts to make something bigger for the community, so that we can collect cultural artifacts, preserve our heritage, teach our community and the broader community about our community, our people, and inspire future generations to continue to collect. I remember when we first started the We Are Hmong Minnesota exhibit in 2015 with the Minnesota History Center. Uh, uh, People didn't know who the Hmong people were. And that's why we went to the History Center and said, let's do this. This is 40th anniversary of Hmong in America. So let's look at how do we showcase the community. There's also a lot of health equity issue within our community as well. During the COVID pandemic, uh, we have more losses in the Hmong community than any other community, and it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way. So COVID had a huge impact on the Hmong community. Not only did many of our community members died, but we weren't able to go to church. We weren't able to celebrate New Year. We weren't able to have community meals, family meals, like how we, as a collective society, as we do. And then, I know there were a lot of conversation at the national level and the local level here about the need to disaggregate data as well. And so, because that's how we're going to be able to address issues specifically within our community. The largest Asian group in Minnesota is actually Hmong. And so, but all of the data still have not been disaggregated. So it's very difficult to sort out the Chinese from the Vietnamese, from the Lao, from the Hmong. And so until we get a grasp of that, we know that there's high number of people with diabetes, with high blood pressure within our community because of the changing diets. In the home country, we ate vegetables. We walk uphill, downhill. Now people eat to sit. And every meal there's meat. And if you go to Hmong Marketplace in Hmong Village, I often give tours to people, to non-Hmong people. And I'll remind them that many of the food that they're selling there are deep fried food. So that was not like that in the country of Laos. So now with new diets and so on and so forth, there's new health problems impacting our community. And then also ensuring academic success across all level. The number one priority for the Hmong community is education because we know that education is the way out of poverty. And so always encouraging young people to go into education and to pursue higher education, to pursue technical degrees. And so that continues to be, I think, a number one issue within our community. And then last and but not least, I would say the access to opportunities and access to services. You know, the first stage of the Hmong community resettlement efforts in America is basically to access to services. We need employment services, we need ESL services, and so on and so forth. But now, as people become much more proficient in and better understanding the new environment that we live in, many people have also been, start a business. Like there's over 9,000 Hmong businesses in Minnesota. Many of them, need access to opportunities. So how do we win contract with the state? How do we win contract with the county? How do we win contract with the city? And so it's got to that level. And how do we, I was talking to a group of housing developers, and I said, uh, how about working with the county and working with the city, which own contract and which own sites, and working with them to secure a contract to build affordable housing units for people in the community. So things like that. I think that's something that the community now is very much into, very much into. Anyway, so I talked a lot, and of course, there's a lot of resources in our community too. So if you're interested in learning more about some of the topics that I talked about the history, the culture, the academic successes, and the variety of sources that you can go to, and these are readily available on the internet, on YouTube, and so on and so forth, Facebook, social media. The channel two. About 10 years ago, uh, worked with us to put us a documentary film together, also develop curriculums to complement the document about the Hmong history and the secret word of Laos. So you can find that on the TPT website. The Center for Hmong Studies here, we have a large library collections. We also have ongoing exhibits. We host lectures and conferences. We have a large archival collections about the secret world of Laos and the refugee camp experiences and so on and so forth. Hmong archives with Hmong Freedom with the Freedom Library on the east side of St. Paul. They also have a large collections of artifacts, but it's an archival facility, so they don't usually loan things out. Hmong Culture Center on University and Western Avenue. They also do have a Hmong museum, but they have a resource center upstairs as well. They teach cultural ceremonies for Hmong people who are interested in running a funeral, running a wedding, and so on and so forth. And then on the World Wide Web, Hmong Story 40, they have done a really good job of interviewing many of the Americans who served with the Hmong during the Secret War of Laos. They've also interviewed many of the Hmong who served with the Americans and who served in that war. They've also done a very good job of showcasing that and put it on their website. The Minnesota Digital Library also do have large collections of interviews that they've done with the History Center, with the Center for Hmong Studies. And so you can go to the Minnesota Digital Library and be able to tap into that. And then Hmong American Center in Wausau, Wisconsin, they have a large museum down there as well. So these are just some of the resources that are available for you. I think the social media sometimes is bad, but it's also good because there's a lot of resources that are available for people. So with that, I think I'll conclude my presentation and take questions that you may have.
Okay, well, to start with, I just posted a link to the Al Quee interview,
Oh, well,
um,
wonderful.
and that's in the chat,
Mm,
but that's me posting it in the chat. If you have comments and questions
mhm,
for our speaker here, then put those in the Q&A.
mm,
So the link's over there in the chat because I put it there, but if you have questions, comments for our speaker, please put them in Q&A. We have a few to
mhm,
start with, some
mhm,
of which you did answer
mm,
throughout your
mm.
thing, but it's worth revisiting. I think especially the
Sure.
first one, they're asking if can you define Hmong?
Um,
Is it people from Vietnam, Laos, or both? And I think um, when you were presenting the history, kind of
yeah.
shows for a long time um, you're people without, displaced from your
Yeah.
country, and that's why people don't
Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint where we are, right?
right.
And I think even within the Hmong community, there's big debate of the origin of Hmong people. Where did that come from, right? And so there's several theories out there. One theory was that the Hmong are from Siberia, and the Sami people, some of their clothing, very, very similar to Hmong clothing, some of the embroideries. And in fact, many of the folk tales talked about how the Hmong came from a place that was very cold, very dry. So that looks like it might be Siberia. So that's one of the theories. The other theory is that Hmong probably one of the lost tribe of Israel because a lot of our cultural practices, religious practices, uh, goes back to the Old Testament. For example, after the shaman ceremony, they put blood on the door. And where did that come from? The books of Exodus, right? For the Exodus. And whenever they have ceremonies to cure somebody, shaman ceremony, they'll go to the kitchen, the hearth, and the stove, and use the charcoal to put a cross on the forehead of the person being cured. And so, and some of the uh, I would say some of the cultural ceremony within Orthodox Jews very similar to Hmong. So as if like everything that we've done is all in the Old Testament. And then there's also a theory that the Hmong probably came from Mongolia. And so it's kind of interesting that there's a horse when you go to Southeast Asia. There's only one kind of horse that the Hmong people uses, and you can only find that horse in Inner Mongolia. So how did that happen, right? So I always tell my students, it's up to you to go find, do the research. But at least we pointed you out to you some of the complexity of our history. Now you can go and dig deeper. But a lot of our history emerged from, I would say, talked about China. It emerged from China. Like for example, the word for farming, it talks about the fact that the Hmong were cultivating. That's the word for farm. The Hmong were cultivating wet rice, and then when they lost, they took to the hill upland to cultivate dry rice. And we talked about the fact that the Hmong were escaping the Chinese, and and we lost the book of knowledge, and so we sold the book knowledge onto women's clothing. That's why it's colorful. So the word for education is "gantao gantao," the meaning that go and if you want to learn, if you want to decipher knowledge, go and learn the embroidery. So and that's also attached to China. And when we die, we go to China. So it's more likely that the Hmong emerged out of China because the Chinese said the Hmong was living in China before. So I think that if you think about, where did the Hmong people come from, why, and so on and so forth, who are they? So the Hmong people, we're just a group of people that call ourselves Hmong, and we originated out of China, and but majority of the Hmong people in the United States came from Laos, and so earlier in the census, the census office defined the Hmong as East Asians, and we said no. When you say we are East Asian, you neglect the fact that the majority of the Hmong who are in the United States came from Laos, not from China. So when you say we are East Asian, then you erase our history and our alignment and our partnership and our friendship with the United States during the Secret War of Laos. So,
Okay. Someone's wondering, are there multiple dialects in Hmong?
yes, there are actually different dialects. And I think the predominant one in China, they call it, there's three major dialects. There's the Eastern dialect, the Western dialect, and then the Middle dialect. So the most of the Hmong people in the United States, we are the Western dialect. And within the Western dialect, there's two regional dialects. There's the White Hmong dialect and the Green or Blue Hmong dialect. And they are very different in the sense that they're very similar and different in some ways. Like for example, to go, the Green Hmong would say Hmong, the white one would say moo, right? And then there's some vocabulary differences as well. So the three-legged stool for cooking, the Hmong lang called sang ju, and the white Hmong called tu luk gong. See, so there are differences, and there are also a lot of commonality as well. That's why there's an effort in the community to have, agencies when you do translations, that you do translations in both white Hmong and blue Hmong, because some people may not have exposure to white Hmong at all, Hmong language at all, or some white Hmong may not know green Hmong at all. And so that's the complexity of things. So we are not a monolithic community. we are we are a very diverse community as well. But most of the translations out there are in white Hmong. And so many of the green Hmong, blue Hmong are saying, no, we need to change and make sure that we do translate in both dialects.
Okay. Um, okay, getting back to some of the early things that you
Mhm.
shared. Someone's wondering, are the Hmong farmers subcontracting with major corporation investors in the chicken and eggs and fruit industry, or
Yeah,
are they developing their own investments?
I think both. I think both. You have Hmong people who are who you know the poetry industry, they contract with the major poetry company, and
Mhm.
so they would raise the chicken for them, they would collect the eggs for them, and so they do contract with major corporations. Like for example, I went down there. I have a uncle from my wife's side, my in-law side. He used to own 12 chicken houses, and each of those chicken houses can house up to 25,000 chickens. And I go in there and say, "Oh, it's so stinky, stinky." And say, "No, it's not stinky of chicken poop, but it's stinky of money." Because after they remove all the eggs and all the chickens, farmers would come in and buy those manure for fertilizer. And each house, they can get about $45,000 out of those chicken manures. I'm like, okay, and then it doesn't smell bad anymore. It smells money. That's how they view it. It's like it smells money. That's all there is. So, but yeah, so they do work closely with some of the major corporations to do that.
So, also, someone's wondering if you could go back, some of your initial photos of Vietnam and describe some of the individuals in any
Oh,
of the photos, or are they ones that you found?
yeah, I can certainly do that. Let's see. Okay, so did you see this one? Okay, this one, this is Dien Bien Phu, a painting. The top one is painting of Dien Bien Phu and the siege at Dien Bien Phu. And on the lower left are some of the Hmong people that served with the French during that war. Some of the key leaders and famous leader who became minister, in fact, in the government. And then on the right, lower right, is the French government honoring Gu Chao, who's still alive in North Carolina, who basically served with the French. General Sassy was the general that was assigned to work with the Hmong in Laos. And they were on their way, along with General Pao. General Pao, the key Hmong leader, in this picture, the person on the lower right hand on the top pictures here, that's General Pao. And so he worked with the French closely, and they were on their way to go and help uh, rescue, save the French at Dien Bien Phu. But halfway there, and Dien Bien Phu already fell. And at that time, Zheng Pao was still a lieutenant. And so Zheng Pao was the man that basically the American approached and recruited to help the American fight the war, the secret war of Laos. And so here's some of the early pictures of some of the Americans in the Thai Paru. The Thai Paru are the darker men are actually Thai. They are border patrol in Thailand, patrol officers, because the United States uh, General Colonel Belair, who was a CIA operative stationed in Thailand, he was in charge of the Thai border patrol in Thailand. And so when he was working in Thailand, trying to secure the border to prevent communism from spreading into Thailand, he heard about General Pao. So when after the military coup took place, they sent him to Laos, and he sought out General Pao. And so he said, I heard about him. I heard about his reputation. And so when I was sent to Laos. I was the first person that I saw was General Pao, and he was not disappointed by that. So on the bottom are some of the key earlier colonel. Like for example, the guy on the right side, he's the basically the chief of staff for General Pao. Tulu Moa, who was also very close to General Pao. General Pao married his sister, and so all of these people, unfortunately, they all passed away. The guy on the left, Nakal Li Fong, he passed away in Minnesota, and he still has children here in Minnesota. So these are some very old and iconic pictures. Here are some of the Hmong being trained in Thailand. Again, the Americans could not come into Laos for fear of violations, and so uh, the Hmong were sent to Laos. So my dad was sent to Laos twice to be trained. I mean, sent to Thailand twice to be trained by the Thai Paru, and then came back. And so here you have on the left, on the lower left side here, you also have an American advisor with General Pao there. So, like I said, you will not you will most likely not find American CIA operative or military people in Laos wearing military uniforms. And before they were assigned to Laos to work in Laos, they call it sheep dip, right? You're supposed to give up all your rank, give up your identity, and be sent over there. And if you're to die there, nobody knows about you. America will totally deny who you are. And so that's the complexity of war, right? Complexity of war. And then on the right here are some of the resistant fighters. So here you have some images of, Hmong people. Many Hmong people died uh, crossing the Mekong River. I also interviewed a young lady who uh, her family paid the Thai boatsman to take them from Laos to Thailand. They got to the middle of the river, and the Thai boatsman purposely tilted the boat. So all of them fell, and the rest of the family drowned, with the exception of she had her brother on the back. Her brother was on her back, and they got stuck on a rock. She had to make the ultimate decisions to let go of her brother so she could swim across the river because both of them would not have survived. And so when they interviewed her, she said, "Why did you do that?" She said, "Somebody needs to live to tell the story." And so a lot of atrocities like that. Even my own pastor from Hmong American Alliance Church in Maplewood, his wife drowned in the river after the Thai boatsman tilted the boat. And he tried to save her three times, but couldn't do so. There's a lot of, traumas associated with, our escape from Laos into Thailand. And many people don't want to talk about it. And even for my students here, I assign them to go and interview the parents and the grandparents. And I tell them, tell your parents and your grandparents that this is an assignment. And if you don't do this assignment, you're going to fail this class. So they would come back and do a presentation in class. Many of them would be in tears. I didn't know that my mom lost her brother. I didn't know that my grandma lost her husband like this in the jungle that died, or that I had a sibling that starved to death because some trek across from Thailand to Laos took as long as 30, even 30 days to get across into Thailand. And so sometimes they will feed the baby opium so that they would not cry. But the opium sometimes overdosage, and so the baby died, and they leave it there. Or people who are too sick to travel, they leave it there and they die, abandon them. So one of my aunts is saying, my aunt, she had two of her children with her, and her husband um, was traveling, and she drank, yellow rain, which is a chemical that the communists spread on people and to poison people's water wells and rivers. So her family drank that and diarrhea to diarrhea, so they couldn't travel anymore. So her husband was also leading a group of relatives. And so she just told him, leave us here, go back and come back and get us. And he was on his way halfway, and people said, where are you going? There's enemy coming. And he said, I have to go pick up my wife and my children. They said, we saw them dead on the side of the road, so don't go. And he just never got there to save them. So a lot of traumas like that. Yeah. And somebody
Um,
asked here about who was I related to General Xiong? No, General Pao. General Pao. Yeah, I'm related to Colonel Xiong Xiong and Colonel Sendang Xiong. Both were my grandfather. But General Pao actually he died in 2012. He came here and visited Concordia with the students and actually ate with the student twice. And even though he's had dietary restriction, he did that. And he did our open house at the Center for Hmong Studies when we started as well. So, but I know his family well. His second oldest son just passed away, and they just did a funeral this past weekend for him as well.
okay. Let's see. Now, would you say that churches provided the majority of help in resettlement versus government agencies?
Yeah, the government only provides assistance to the church for I think it's like for like 90 days. That's it. And then after that, then the church are on their own. But assistance is basically helping them find housing, find schools, find jobs for them. Because again, the priority was to make sure that people are not a burden to the local community. And so people came here, like for example, my dad, when we came to United States in 1976, they already found a job for my dad. My dad was a captain, and they found a janitorial job for him at my elementary school. And he worked there until we moved to Minnesota in 79. And then he went into a welding program, came out, didn't go into welding, but ended up being an interpreter for Minneapolis Public Health for a long time. And actually, worked for Ramsey County under International Institute as a translator for Ramsey County Human Services, and he retired from there. And my mom, when she came here, Minnesota, she was trained as a cook, a chef. In fact, when she was training to be a chef at St. Paul Technical College, she was making hamburgers for us, baking cakes and making all kinds of breads for us. And so that was our exposure to American food. But she didn't go into that. She went into the public schools and worked in ECFE, early childhood family education there, and actually retired from there. Yeah. But the churches, it's basically the government helping them minimally for 90 days to help them, to help the refugees to find housing, jobs, and English. Yeah.
Okay, I thought this was interesting. What is the percentage of Hmong immigrants who have become or are seeking U.S. citizenship?
Yeah, I think that I would say about 60% are now United States citizens. So yeah, 60% are now United States citizens, but we still have some people who are straggler out there. Like, for example, my brother, we've been here for almost 50 years, and we just found out that he's not a United States citizen. And so we were all like, what the heck have you been doing all this time? And now to apply for citizenship, it's almost like $800 to apply for applications. And now with the Trump administration requiring for people to answer 20 questions, I don't think, I teach American government here. I administer the citizenship test to my students, they all fail. So we're like joking. We should do that with the American citizens here in America to see how many pass that citizenship test. But I was lucky when when I worked in Washington, D.C. with the United States Senator Carl Levin, and in '88, came back and I decided to seek my citizenship. And I went to the citizenship office, and they only asked me two questions. After they asked me, what are you majoring in? I said, political science. Where? At the University of Minnesota. So she just asked me, how many terms a president can serve, and what happened if the president died, who takes over? So those are very simple questions. But for some people, it's very difficult. Like, for example, you need to know when the United States birthday, right? You need to know who the Attorney General's office is. You need to know all of the cabinet officers, some of the cabinet officers. Some of those questions are very hard that normal American citizens, natural born American citizens can't even answer. So, but yeah, so I would say about 70% of the people are United States citizens now. Yeah. And they're proud of it. I think there's a question here about religion, right? Uh,
Yes.
yeah, right now, 60% of the population are still animists, 40% Christians. And but I'm starting to see a lot of the younger generations now, either they're becoming animists, I mean, they become atheists because or non-religion, I call it, right? Because not atheists, all non-religious. Because they are young and their parents have passed already. They don't know how to do the cultural ceremonies anymore. And some of them have decided to convert to Christianity. So it's kind of interesting because they don't know how to practice the old thing. And then some people who are stuck in between because their mother may be Christian, their father may be animist. They don't know where to go, so they just stay in the middle. And so and this is from experience in working with many of my students here. And I say, well, you follow your heart. Where do you want to go? And I always tell people that, even here, yeah, we're a religious institution here at Concordia. And I tell people that the difference is that for Hmong people, for religion, here's how I define it. We don't have religion, we have fear, meaning that we fear the spirit world, we fear the demonic world. And so any religion or any activities that prevent us from being harmed by demonic forces, then we take that as ours, right? Like, for example, the tying the string on the wrist, right?
Mm.
Uh, that's to protect the spirit. That's a Hindu practice. That's not a monk practice, but it became Hmong religion, right? And so, uh, with a community being like ours, where you're moving from place to places, you're adopting and you're adapting to the local religious beliefs. And so it's like accumulations of things. But all the reason when you do that is because you fear harm by the spirits. Right? And so I tell my students, I said, I rather, as a Christian, my family became Christian in the 60s, some of the earlier Hmong Christian who became Christians. And I said, I rather worship a God that's forgiving, a God full of grace, than a God that punishes me all the time, or a demonic forces that punish me all the time, that always ask me to appease it, to bring food, to burn incense, to bring pepper money for them in order to appease them so they won't cause sickness for me. So I rather go the other route than the other route. So that's my preference. I tell students, and I say it's your decision. But in my Hmong culture and society course, I lay out the two differences and let the student decide. And I say, you, the decision is yours. But here's my decisions. So, but yeah, 60% are still animists, and 40% are Christians.
Okay, I accidentally moved one over to answer that I wanted to talk about, relating to living arrangements for the Hmong community members, because it was very multi-generational, I think,
Mm.
especially when you first came.
Yeah,
Is it still
it.
multi-generational in households, or is it dispersing a little bit more?
I think it's dispersing a little bit more, but I think that it was very evident during the pandemic. It's very difficult to have isolations, to
Hmm.
isolate people when they're sick because you have multi-generational people living in the house and you have large family members as well, right? And so average of 6 kids per household, and if you have your parents living with you, then it becomes very complicated, right? But now a lot of the younger generations have fewer kids, and many of them don't want to live with the parent. And I'll give you a perfect example from my personal experience. My son just got married, and we had an extra room in the house, and I say, just live in the house. No, I want to live on my own. He moved out, Roger, and he lives in Minneapolis. And I tell him, I said, you know, why you live so far? Traffic congestion. You're always driving down there, taking 2, 3 hours. He says, so I want to live out in the suburb. I don't want to live in the city. So, but yeah, he's young. I told him, stay in the house. You don't have to worry about rent. You don't have to worry about anything. You can save money. So when you have your kids, you can move out and buy a house and somewhere. But yeah, these younger generation, they don't want to stay with you anymore. They moving out. So I think it's changing. It's changing, but in the past is very difficult. Like for example, even under my parents still alive and live in the North End area. My youngest brother lives there. I have two brothers that lives with my parents, and one of them is with kid. So there's still things like that. And I have a disabled brother, and we had a during the pandemic. The nurses would come and visit, take care of him all the time. And my father basically said, stop the nurse from coming because pandemic, he might bring COVID. And he did. He brought COVID and infected my brother. And fortunately, it was not the other kind, right? But my disabled brother decided to move out. And so now he's living his own. But two of the other brothers still live with my parents. So you still have some of that. People living together, multi-generation living together in the household. Yeah.
Well, there's so many questions that we've had, but a lot of comments about things like um, that they've seen around the Twin Cities, like the soccer tournaments,
Oh yeah.
I know the courts that just opened, Keller Lake, the
Yeah.
and I can never say that properly, the Hyun
Uh,
Job,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah. There's
which
a yeah, the spin top. There's a so it's very pop. It's kind of interesting because that sport where you have the
thing,
Tulu,
yeah.
and yeah, the Tulu, which is a spinning top game. It used to be played in the village among young people only. Now here in the Twin Cities, it's amazing. It's the older people that are playing, and they're having leagues, and they do competition at the soccer tournament in July at McMurray Field in St. Paul, and then there's also the Sepatakra, which is the rattan ball that you kick with your feet over
Hmm.
a small net. So I was the chair of that for a couple of years, and we actually brought back gold medals from South Korea and from Thailand. Some of our teams, and I always joke that here you have these kids of refugees going back to Thailand and bringing back the King's Cup to the United States. And but yeah, so there's a lot of new activities. I mean, now people are not into hockey, people are not into football, they're into soccer. And so I really compliment the, Ramsey County, recreation department and also St. Paul Park and Rec for modifying some of their fields, like the Sip-at-the-Crawl court. I mean, we built 3 professional Sip-at-the-Crawl court over at Duluth and Case Recreational Center. And then also the Tulu Court up in Keller and over at Failing Lake. Also at the Northdale area, we've also put up sepulchral courts because now the Karen populations are playing, and so I really compliment Ramsey County and St. Paul recreational city of St. Paul for modifying that. And even some of the high schools, they don't have football teams anymore. They have soccer teams because predominantly they're Karen and they're Hmong players, and so you have to change with the changing demographic in order to bring him in. So yeah.
Yep. So it's going on 2 o'clock here. I'd encourage
Mm,
people like visit the Hmong Museum, find the
mm,
Hmong Museum online,
yeah. Hmm.
and consider visiting there. They've been doing collecting oral history this year,
Hmm.
taking
Hmm.
advantage of the 50th anniversary to go around. I know the Maplewood Library here, we hosted them for 4 days,
Hmm.
recording oral history. So do that, seek out more information. Just keep being curious, find out what you can do to um, walk alongside our Hmong community and our Southeast Asian community here in Minnesota, and um, find out what their concerns are, and just keep going with it.
Yeah.
It's been a
Yeah.
great presentation, so many positive comments from people.
Mm.
They've been fascinated and
Oh, thank you.
enjoyed this a lot.
Thank you. And I want to toss in one thing before we sign off here. uh, at the Center for Hmong Study, we developed a set of 5 panels, roll-up banner panels on early history, the resettlement, the Secret War, and so on and so forth. So that's available for businesses to borrow, library and business to borrow, and you can have it up for one week, in your corridor. We've also developed a series of 5 panels on Hmong tapestry, the meaning of Hmong embroideries,
Mhm.
and so that's also available free of charge for groups to borrow and put up in their business establishment. So
Yep.
let me know if you're interested in that. Again, shoot me an email. It's just my last name, Xiong at csp.edu. So Concordia St. Paul.edu. Thank you.
Yep. We have a couple of the tapestries, three here at the Maplewood
Mm,
Library, and they're beautiful. So,
yeah.
okay.
Thank you. All right.
Well, thanks everyone. Have a good
Yeah.
day.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.